Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Gathering for Justice's ongoing film series, Revolutionary Reels. My name is Denise Mapanda, and I'm the COO at the Gathering for Justice, and I have the great pleasure of introducing our program and introducing you to our moderator tonight. Revolutionary Reels is one of the Gathering's longest running programs. Starting in 2016, the series began as a monthly screening series of mostly, but not all, documentaries about various locations, at various locations around New York City. When the pandemic began, this was one of the programs that was difficult to transition to doing completely virtually. However, tonight's program is an opportunity for some incredibly talented filmmakers and really good friends of ours here at the Gathering to have a conversation about the intersection of film and social justice. After all, the Gathering for Justice was founded by the legendary artist and activist Harry Belafonte, a man who made a profound impact on the world by working and producing at that same intersection. The Gathering for Justice is now in our 15th year, and we have a robust and ambitious and exciting programming agenda. So I encourage you all to please follow us. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at gather4justice. And you can check out our extensive work at our website, gatheringforjustice.org. And if you'd like to support us and invest in our work, you can text The Gathering to 44321. And now allow me to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Jazmine Williams. Jazmine is a writer and producer who has programmed and produced large-scale activations that cross the worlds of art and culture with social activism, such as Into Action, We Rise, Ain't Your Mama's Heat Wave comedy special, United State of Women, and Still I Vote, Selma, and Black Futures Symposium, among many more. As a writer, Jazmine was contracted as a feature poet for Nate Parker's 2016 film, Birth of a Nation. Also for Ogi Egbuanu's 2020 directorial debut, Invisible Portraits, and a copywriter at Amplifier Art, Levi's, and NBC. Jazmine is a sought-after consultant and messaging advisor, currently working on the Change Music vertical within Color of Change's Change Industries campaign. Please join me in welcoming Jazmine.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to introduce my esteemed panelists today. So I'm gonna get right into it. First with director Brandi Webb. Director Brandi Webb made her debut as playwright, producer, and director in 2005 for her first off-Broadway play, Yet to Evolve. The play inspired her to launch a theater company and film company, Yet to Evolve Productions. Director Brandi Webb just released her first documentary feature film, Betrayal of a Nation, which she wrote, directed, and produced. She earned her bachelor's degree in theater arts and communication from Clark Atlanta University and her associates in theater arts from Borough Manhattan Community College. Also joining us today, we have Rameen. Aminzadeh is a filmmaker, editor, and activist whose current work includes the Netflix series We Are the Brooklyn Saints and the upcoming second season of the hit HBO series The Vow. Rameen also has two of his own documentary series in development, his Flint water crisis doc, Bigger Than Water, and a documentary on Justice League New York City called Get Up, Stand Up. And finally, we've got Paul Eckstein, who has been writing, producing, and acting for over 40 years. He grew up in Brooklyn and graduated from Brown University with degrees in international relations and creative writing. He's a founding member of the Naked Angels Theater Company. Paul completed production of season 2 of the acclaimed hit Godfather of Harlem, which he co-created, starring Forrest Whitaker on Epix. And then prior to that, Paul led the writer's room on the first year of the Netflix hit drama Narcos. So Paul's long list of projects over the years focused on stories and culture from people of color. Hey, everybody.
Hey, great to be here.
Yes, yes.
I am so excited.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that this is going to be a powerful conversation. Get us started and to drop us right into what we're here to discuss, which is the intersection of film and activism. I'm going to run the tape. I just love saying that. Run a tape on Bigger Than Water. Let me see. You guys bear with me while I get my share screen going.
Oh, yeah. Technology is a beast.
Oh, man, you guys.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here we go. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
What? Okay, let me stop the share. Did you see the video? Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we could see it.
The screen came up. Video screen came up, definitely.
Maybe I wasn't the best one to give this role to. All right, let's go. Let's do it again.
Great. We got
Doing
faith.
fine.
Yeah, please. We're fine. This is normal. The Zoom share screen is always the challenge of the modern COVID world.
That's right.
You're kicking my tail right now. Okay, I'm gonna try it again. Here we go.
We always gotta have the. There you go.
Can you see it now? Great.
That is,
Yeah.
That is not the right one. Sorry, you guys. Jesus Christ.
Worries.
All right. Well, I get this myself together. I'm just going to dive into the conversation first, and then I'll circle back on the trailer. I apologize, everybody. Rameen, so first of all, what everyone's going to see is that you did an incredible job on this project. Can you tell us a little bit about it while I tee this up?
Absolutely. So back in, I believe, 2015, Justice League went on a fact-finding mission out in Flint to see exactly what was happening, how we could support, and whose stories we could uplift. And a good friend of mine, Fisher Stevens, had great documentarian. We had a good conversation about how we can help uplift these stories. And while we were out there, we kind of fell right into the middle of it and had a chance to meet a reverend in the north side of Flint who was, had been there for 15, 20 years and worked through all the violence and all the things that were happening in Flint. We met the mother whose house was ground zero. Her twins stopped growing. We met several other folks, an activist, Naira Sharif, who led the charge on, what was happening behind the whole emergency manager conflict and taking away the voting right of the people, and just got blessed to really meet these folks and get a chance to hear their stories. And what was supposed to be a couple PSAs to help uplift turned into an 8-part series, 8 hours of the tragedy that Flint still is, and the justice we're hoping to find for these folks. Nice.
All right, here we go.
If somebody had told me 3 years ago you were going to be drinking out the Flint River,
I think you got to hit the
I'm
other.
an abject liar. There is nobody in this city that wasn't told by the age of 3 or 4, you don't get in it, you don't go near it, you don't eat anything out of it. That is poison. We don't. Our kids don't matter. Nobody in this city mattered.
Governor Snyder, I'm glad you're taking action now, but it's a little bit late for the kids in Flint whose health has been compromised, for people whose immunity systems were already compromised, for a city in America that is on its knees because of a failure of a philosophy of governance you advocated.
People are bringing in bottles of hair. We're bringing in jugs of brown water. We're showing our rashes. We have all this physical evidence. Nobody's listening to us.
We discounted the fact that we were being poisoned. We just did not believe in America that was happening. It's very plain. It's very simple. The love of money is the root of all evil.
You are literally in a fight for your life right now.
We were not declared a disaster zone because this is a man-made disaster.
You look at how much energy they put in lying. It would have been 1,000 times easier to do their goddamn job.
Nice. Well, it sounded good. I'm not sure if everybody saw the
Sounded
video.
really
It was
good.
a white screen, but it's okay. It sounded great. It happens. Don't worry. The Zoom thing is an issue. But folks can check it out at www.biggerthanwater.com. It was a powerful journey. It was a powerful 4 or 5 years that we've been filming with these folks. And honestly, the crisis continues. I mean, they literally had arrested 15 people or 12 people on attempted murder charges, went through this whole trial and then threw it all away and decided they weren't going to prosecute anybody. And luckily, we got a new special prosecutor that came in and, just really took the investigation seriously. And right now they've made another, I think 7 or 8 arrests, including the governor. They finally arrested the governor and charged him along with the head of health and Department of Environmental Safety, Health and Humanity, basically every lead in that particular government's, at the time that played a role in really just, disregarding the voice of the people, putting the entire community, 100,000 people exposed to lead for over almost a year. And literally the next 6 generations of these folks' family will be affected by the downfalls of lead, which are very, very serious. So it's an incredible journey and just, something that we're still fighting for and still covering.
And Rameen, you could have literally made a film on anything in the world. What drove you to this topic? What made you feel like you had to respond to this moment?
For me, injustice has always been like the issue, right? Like growing up, I was one of those kids that played in the street real heavy, got into a lot of trouble. And then, in 2004, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. They tried to give me 226 years in prison, spent 5 years fighting for my freedom, and eventually, went to trial and was found not guilty across the board. But 5 years of my life was taken away. My daughter was taken away. Like everything that could possibly, affect someone's life, career, family, money, everything was just taken off the board. So anytime any kind of injustice has popped up since, I've tried to, lend my voice or my skills or what I can to the cause. And growing up in Baltimore, lead has always been an issue. So many friends, have had their lives destroyed by what they were exposed to. So when we saw this entire community just, literally wiped out because of this lead problem and Legionnaires and so many other diseases that they were exposed to, just being there and witnessing it, it was a no-brainer for me that I wanted to help uplift the story.
You took your responsibility as a filmmaker very seriously. Segues my question for the rest of the group is, what is the responsibility of a filmmaker? And anyone can take this.
I think the responsibility of a filmmaker is, first, you have to find your voice, right? Because everyone has the cause that is most important to them, right? What they could most or best relate to. So I think once you find your voice, then you have the responsibility to use your voice and uplift the other voices around you that are in alignment, right? So if your voice is about the movement for Black lives, right? Then you may want to uplift stories that deal with the movement or push towards the movement for Black lives. So I think as a filmmaker, your job is to identify the voice, identify the story, and then uplift in a creative way that the viewer, that will get and hold the viewer's attention.
You know, tough question for me, because filmmakers, I believe, we're shamans, we're storytellers. We have deep responsibilities. I take my job very, very seriously, and that our job is to, as Brandi was saying, find our voice so that we can get at the essence of the truth. That's our jobs as storytellers. Is we got to make our voice accessible, and one that is defined and full of expertise and skills, and engages people and becomes entertainment. But at the bottom, you know, like that we're not here to make nonsense. Like, our job opens people's minds. My dream is to have impact, to my work to change the way people think and to uplift them and motivate them to be better people, to learn and be more sympathetic, to understand their sense of history or where they're coming from. And for me, one of the responsibilities that my medium, which is, I think, a little, you know, I tell stories. I'm less of a documentarian like these two other esteemed artists. They are really able to sort of get into a medium where they're just brutally unveiling the truth of a situation, sometimes tragic. Me, I like to listen to the story. So I have a responsibility to the characters in the story. That's what I listen to most often first. And they usually tell me where the truth of the message is.
What's that? Why is the responsibility for the artist so great? Like, none of this sounds like light and heavy. I mean, you know, light and exciting, and not, I won't say it doesn't sound exciting. I think we kind of have a stigma around what artists are, and that's, you know, we're kind of just blowing in the wind and going with the vibes and, you know, just chilling. Why then is this work such a heavy lift for us? Like, what everybody else seems to be coasting. Why is the responsibility so heavy for artists?
It's wild. You know, artists like Mr. B says, the gatekeepers are truth, right? Like, at some point, the amount of, you know, acknowledgement and what comes with the benefits of the job, how we're rewarded, you got to give that back, right? In some kind of way. So in my mind, it's like that responsibility becomes so heavy because, or there's so much weight put on it. And it's not always taken seriously by, you know, every filmmaker or artist or whatever it is, right? But in my mind, for me, it's such a heavy responsibility because I wouldn't be here without the audience, right? Like, there's a million stories and a million storytellers, but for them to take the time to listen to, you know, my voice or my telling of this story, I want to give that back. And then you think about, you know, the billions of dollars that are spent in this industry to, you know, that really change people's lives at certain degrees, depending on where they come into the fold. It's like, what can we do for the community with that money, right? Like, if my neighbors in the west side of Baltimore are spending all their bread on, you know, watching one of my docs or going to Netflix or going to HBO or watching any one of these series, paying for those subscriptions, I feel like we have some responsibility to uplift their voices, who are usually marginalized, usually muffled, usually not even heard.
Yeah, you know, history is so important for me. And, you know, I think shaman, traditionally, before there was any kind of informational system, they pass on our culture, our understanding of the world, our sense of where we are. That's what a shaman does, is the lessons that are taught are through stories, through a passing on, paying it forward of our history. And so at its core, that's sort of what we do. And I think everybody on this panel, if we could do something else, we probably would, but we can't help it. I got to do this. I don't have a choice. I know you, Jazz. You gotta spit poems. I just like that's who you are and where we are. And if I could have done anything else, I probably would have. But the call is strong, and part of that call is an understanding of the responsibility of what our craft is about, and appreciating all those people who have come before, and that when we can have an effect with our craft, that's a serious responsibility. I mean, I think of Godfather of Harlem as a piece of entertainment, but my hope, my dream is that everybody who watches it goes to Google afterwards and discovers who Adam Clayton Powell is, and looks at Malcolm X and understands that the issues that were going on in the 1960s are very similar or just reflections of what we're dealing with today. And so that understanding to an audience hopefully opens their minds, gives them a perspective, allows people to act and not be frozen. And ultimately that's what we're doing here, is we're trying to inform our audience and make them better people. And if that can happen just in a little way, just a little bit, somebody gets a little tweak of understanding, well, then we get to giggle a lot. And I don't know any good artists who don't bust their ass. That's the other thing. Everybody I know who's really serious, they're the hardest working people whether they're musicians or painters or filmmakers. Like, we work really hard to do this. So I think that when you have that kind of dedication to something that you can't help it, eventually you get good at it. It happens, and you know what's going to happen, and you're gonna have something worth watching eventually.
Yeah, I think Rameen and Paul pretty much hit the nail on a coffin, with that question. But I'll add to it in just saying that, as artists, we represent the whole, right? We're responsible because we represent the people, but we're the ones that are, I guess we take it the extra notch, right? By expressing ourselves and expressing our society and the people within the society, right? Because we as artists, we are a reflection of our surroundings. And so I think with just that alone, just it being that simple, we hold the responsibility of shedding light.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. We hold the responsibility of shedding light. Yeah, man. Hold on to that one.
Put that in the next episode of next season of
Godfather. I might have to quote you on that one, Brandi, somewhere. Let me tell you.
So how do we answer that calling thoughtfully, right? I think as a society, we really want to look to artists and cultural influencers to take a stand in a position on some of the most pressing issues of our time. But often, and this doesn't necessarily go for this group because there's a lot of great intuition and just grounding here, but for those artists in the world who, there's constantly the spotlight being shifted to them. What's your position on this issue? How do you want to respond? These folks aren't politicians, and they may be well-intentioned, but not grounded in the issue. And they may be completely inequipped to speak thoughtfully to those issues. So as an artist and as someone who, feels called to do this type of work, how do you navigate it and prepare in a thoughtful way? And can you ever prepare enough? And does it even matter? Or you just like, I'm just gonna let spirit guide me in how I show up in the world. Because I feel like that's a big conversation for creators. It's like, I don't know, I'm a creator. I'm not a political scientist. I don't know. So how do you all respond to these issues?
Yeah, I think that everybody has their journey, right? And I feel like you can't judge that journey, right? There's a growth process, and where you're at 5 years from now is not where you're going to be at 10 years from now. And so for me personally, I don't say, what can I create? I I have to be compelled to work on a project. I have to be compelled to want to get an idea out. It has to call out to me, you know? And so, as you mentioned, the artists that are maybe mainstream artists that have attention shifted towards them. I don't judge. And I say that everyone has their journey, and with each person's journey, there's a group of people that can relate to that artist's artwork, right? When NWA had their hits out, there was a group of, you know, people out there that related to the music, and they said that helped them to get through, right? They saw young Black men going through what they were going through. And so I think it's important to just respect everyone's journey. And for me, you know, 15 years ago, when I started producing plays, and I was not interested in social justice. You know, I was really young at the time, and I was like, I want to entertain, I want to make people laugh, I want to bring them joy. But it took for me to go through my own journey and my own situations to say, hey, I don't like what's going on. I want to write something about that. And so you just got to respect the journey and understand that your artistry is your artistry, and there's going to be people that relate to you. So everybody's fulfilling your destiny, regardless of where you're at in that journey.
Take it, Paul.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I think artists get used to failing. You know, part of your journey, as Brandi's talking about, is facing criticism all the time, on for whatever level, in your execution, and what you're doing, and so on. And so I think when you get used to the idea that you're gonna have to fail, you know, you're compelled to leap off cliffs and say stuff and have comments and points of view, because that's what you do. That's what's driving you. And so, you know, it is challenging, and you gotta accept the responsibility. There's times when, I mean, look, I've gotten criticized from people that are, and it's not about my story or the scene or my writing, it's about what I was saying, right? And people, when people come at you like that, you know, that's your responsibility, is to listen. I think, you know, when you're an artist, you don't really know how to do it when you're young, right? You got to live life a little bit. And when you start living life, you start understanding certain aspects of what being human are really, really about. And hopefully your own struggles and perspective allow you to understand the necessity to experience other people's points of view. And that's a big part of being a storyteller. You know, your empathetic center is at the root of your creative expression. And that's when you can apply that across the board, you know, you're going to do better, though it's hard. I mean, let me tell you, I've had people from the NOI and from the nation talk to me about Godfather, and I'm like, but no. Listen, right? And that you have to do that to yourself as well. And when you can do that, as I think as an artist, you know, that's a big part of how you survive, is you're constantly being humble and challenging yourself with the notion that you have to learn. And then you kind of get to this space where you're like, wow, isn't this fun? You know, my job is actually to learn. Ooh, okay, cool. Right? And then you learn stuff, and then you pass it on. And you say, yo, people, look at this crazy shit that just happened in Flint. What are you, crazy? So I learned this, look. And everybody goes, oh, wow. Yeah, right?
100%. For me, I put it in 3 boxes. Like, there's the stuff I want to learn from, the stuff I want to grow on. Then there's the stuff that keeps the bills and the lights paid. And honestly, that's a big part of it. If it's just like self-care. If you can't take care of yourself and yours, you can't be doing a great job at what you're striving to do, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the stuff that I want to do, the things that I dream to do that, you know, I I want to make Godfather. This is one of my favorite shows. Like, this is something that I strive to get into scripted, right? And I've seen a lot of transitions from documentary to scripted, and see how it makes them, you know, some of these directors and storytellers more, you know, more creative, more talented, more focused. And then when you could go back and connect it to truth, it's like, oh my God, like that's where it's at, right? But I think everybody finds their own path. I think, you know, everybody here said it right. Like, there's the path you start on where you're learning and you're growing and you just want to suck in all the knowledge you can. And then there's the part where, you know, family comes in and you got to take care of yourself. And then there's the dream. And those first two pieces are the stepping stones to get to the dream. And it takes commitment. It takes, you know, longevity and tremendous effort. And it takes a lot of humbleness and knowing yourself to be able to, you know, one, take some criticism and make something better by someone else's, you know, eye or critique. And then two, you know, you have to find your own voice and your own place to stand on your own 2 feet and fight for something that matters to you. But all in all, it's, in my mind, it's just a dream come true and a path I'll be on forever.
And I too dream, Rameen.
I too dream.
I too dream.
That's a dream.
Okay, you guys, I really want to show Betrayal of a Nation's trailer. I'll play it for me. We're gonna do this again, and if it doesn't work, we're not even gonna speak that into existence. It's gonna work. Here we go.
That's right.
Can we see it?
Yes.
Ah!
And see Black people as human. The whole goal to have these
We lost audio.
Intentionally harmed anyone, and the history of events have been misconstrued.
Today, I will prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the defendant has indeed committed the crimes charged, as well as many more atrocities which have deeply affected its citizens.
Jim Crow laws were stated as separate but equal, but we know that they were separate and not equal.
The state has invested more than $1 million in incarcerating people.
It was not about suspicious people, but about Black people, Latino people. We've always been presumed guilty and dangerous.
How can we say that all lives matter?
When Eric Garner can be choked on camera, and the officer who did it could get a pay raise.
He said, I can't breathe 11 times. Policing is a responsibility of state.
The way they move when they see a threat like a Malcolm, but with that infrastructure already set up, all they had to do was like change direction to target these Black organizations.
Conspiracy, stalking, harassment, aiding and abetting.
And then they moved to the next stage, which is the physical assassination.
They were determined to lynch Dick Rowland that night.
After the massacre, we were charged, and not one white person was charged.
Arson, fraud, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon.
Yes, this nation has its flaws, just like any place else, but no other place values freedom the way America does.
They make shit up.
America has to right its wrongs. People are still being denied rights, still being held in cells without cause, still being treated differently because of income, gender, or race. Reparations were absolutely lost. This is all still happening.
Prosecution attempts to divide this great nation. Where else on the planet can the people take their own country to trial?
Woo! Amazing! First of all, congratulations, Brandi. On a job well done. Can you tell the audience where they can see your film?
So you can just simply go to the website, betrayalofanation as spelled.com. So betrayalofanation.com. And there's a link there that will take you to renting the film.
Amazing. And the way the story was told was so thoughtful and well-defined and theatrical. Can you tell us a little bit about the storytelling elements that you used and why it was important for you to use those particular elements in telling the story?
So my foundation is in theater. I used to produce plays. And so I come from the narrative world. And this is my first documentary. And while going into doing a documentary, I just could not leave that narrative element behind. It's just there, it's just within me. And so I wanted to put America on trial. And so knowing that this would be a documentary, I just thought it would be great to actually have a trial and then intercut the trial with real life documentary interviews as supporting evidence for the trial. And so, I thought that the idea of having the people actually seeing the trial, I felt like that would be great to get my message across. And I also have other elements. There's poetry in there, right? And so there's music. And so those aspects, even though I come from producing theater and film now, I love all art. I love visual art. There's a lot of artwork that is depicted throughout this documentary. I love poetry. And I even wanted dancing, but everything didn't make the cut, so that's how it became what it now is.
I love that. And I love that you use so many different forms of storytelling in order to get the message across. We hear over and over again, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And sometimes we forget that this is supposed to be fun. Like, we're supposed to be having a blast and, making this entertaining. We don't really hear the conversation around the activism of creating itself, right? It's very rarely discussed. So how important is taking risks to service film activism? Is it something that's important?
I think taking risk is extremely important. I feel like if there's something that your heart and your mind and your creativity is set on, then why are you holding yourself back? Right? So I feel like to not take a risk is to do yourself such a disservice. Being an artist is all about expression and going there, right? Going beyond your limit, if that's even possible. And so the greatest projects, the greatest works of art and every element of art are the ones where the artist took great risk. So you can't be afraid, and when I did this film, I called it a movie-mentary, right? And so I came up with saying it was a movie-mentary because yes, I have the scripted elements and I have the documentary elements within the film, but I felt like for a lot of people or especially the youth that maybe aren't necessarily into documentaries, I also wanted to have that aspect of entertainment for them. And so I figured the best of both worlds could bring in the young people who I really just felt like they really need the knowledge. They really need the education. They need to understand the history. I'm also a substitute teacher, and I've talked to young people and I've asked them questions about history and even high school students. And, you'd be surprised to understand how much they really don't know about our history. And so I felt like this film was especially catered towards them. Did I answer every part of the question? There was another part?
Yeah, I think you answered every part of the question. The other piece for Rameen and Paul that you two can speak to is the activism within creating, and is it important to take risks and push the boundaries, and how is that in service to film and artivism as a whole?
Well, let me start. I don't know how else you do art except take risks. I mean, that's sort of what we do, right? We got to do it all the time. But I think, you know, Brandi, what you're talking about, degrees of not judging people before, because that's where I come from. That's clearly where everybody here comes from. But, you know, there's plenty of entertainers who that risk of making a political statement can cost them, right? And so, you know, I like to, I mean, that's not ever going to be a question for me. Everybody knows I'm always going to, you know, be leaping off that cliff in the statements and the form and so on. But, you know, there's people who have to balance that, I think, with how their impact can best serve, I would say. You know, and it's interesting to see how different artists, and not only just artists, but athletes too, how they're using their powers now as compared to like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, you know, and it's just, you know, I try to have sympathy for, it's a hard thing to talk about or determine when your career isn't based on making political statements or emphatic statements about culture and history. That's where I started. I did the same thing, Brandi. I'm like, my theater is all like political activism theater. That's why I did it. But that's the brand that I've built my career on. And I would think that there's a lot of people who go, look, if I'm challenged now by having to deal with this shit, because that's not what I do. I just make music or tell stories or hit jumpers. And is it really my responsibility to make a statement, to be politically active, to have a point of view that is, you know, about the responsibility that I feel to comment on this world or to do something? Like, that's a big choice for a lot of people. It seems natural to us, but, you know, I think there's a lot of people who don't have that inclination and even go, you know what, I do that in my private life, or I do that in another place. Right here, my art, I don't want to be burdened by that. I want to be dealing with just the human expression or whatever it is. And, you know, in some ways, look, I just look to respect that, or as Brandi said, not have judgment on it, even though I'm like, well, why the hell are you doing this? But okay, whatever, that's you. You know, it's interesting. It's an interesting dilemma. I think we all as artists chew on it, right?
Absolutely. Like, even if we think about what's happening now in Palestine, right? So many people have lost their trajectory of their careers standing up for Palestine, right? I'm one that feels, you know, we should be as unapologetic as we can in our views and express them and push them and fight for them and push people to think outside of the box that they've put themselves in, right? And whether that's through reaching a certain point in your career, I think there's definitely levels to it, and there's ways in which you have to, you know, take your own situation and your own family situation into consideration on the trajectory that you want to be on, the path you want to be on. But at some point, I think as an artist, you go back to that word responsibility, there is something about the gift of the platform you're given that you should be able to use it in some type of way to uplift somebody. Maybe it's not everything. You can, I think there's, you know, we can all pick and choose what battles we want to fight.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, for me, this whole idea of, you know, the path forward is the path of the most resistance, actually. Like, some people want to go the least resistance. I want the most, because I think that zeitgeist, that conversation that comes out of it is what moves the needle forward.
I love it. You want all the smoke, Rameen. I love it.
I just like
that's quote number 2. That's the most resistance.
Writing it down. I just like to add that, and even though we say, like, yes, you want to go out there and you want to take risk, right, as an artist, like Rameen said, you do have to take your situation and, you know, into accountability. Like, you really have to assess your own situation. But I just want to put out there that as artists, when it comes to pitching your projects, I recommend you take risks, but understand that when you pitch your projects, that there are going to be a group of people that try to put you in a box, and they'll try to get you to tweak and change it and make it more commercial friendly. And at that point, you have to decide for yourself, is my message more important that I'm not willing to shift right? And in which case I may have to just, understand that I may not get this deal and go the independent route and deal with that struggle? Or do I feel like I can live with myself after I've taken the risks for the project, but can I live with myself to water it down now? And that is a personal choice that one has to make for themselves, but understanding what the circumstances you may be in. But I just still feel like you should still take the initial risk. You always got to shoot for it first and then decide and make a determination.
Word from the wise. Director Brandi. Paul, you said something, you piggybacked off of Director Brandi when you said your career started as a political artist. I mean, you're still that, but you kind of built from that space from there in political theater. How do you move into new genres when that's your starting point? Because I often feel like, you can get pigeonholed really easily. And I've just experienced that as a writer of, everyone wants me to write the political pieces. And I'm like, I also like flowers, and I'm a mom, and I got other things I want to talk about, right? So how do you move then? Because there's a piece of that where like I'm reclaiming my creative sovereignty and my own liberation as an artist and just being able to be fluid. So how do you move into new genres when you start off as a political artist or artivist?
Well, first off, I think, it's got to call you. You don't move off until you're told to, in some ways, I think. Like, that's the first, like, you got to wait to have a calling to get someone somewhere else. If the voices that are talking to me are always about politics and making political statements, then I'm generally going to be there, and that's where I'm working. But hopefully what's happened is, as you're doing that, it just kind of opens up more and more doorways, more and more aspects to how you see the statements that you're making. And, you begin to understand that in narrative, metaphor is so much a part of impact. So when you can embrace something like, look, I think one of the most innovative civil rights TV shows on the air in the 60s was Star Trek. It was the most diverse cast. It spoke to universal identities. And it continued to be, I think, the next iterations of that series. You're able to kind of, through the prism of science fiction, just like through the prism of history on my show, but through this prism of a science fiction world, you're able to get at real human dilemmas and issues without sort of the pressure of the present day humanity that we live in. And so you can kind of look at racism funny when the story's about a race of people that have a black side and a white side, and they hate the other race of people that have the black side and the white side here, right? So, when you can use metaphor of something that is out of this world, fantasy or so on, but you're still talking about the same shit. You're still talking about racism. You're still talking about people being divided. You're still talking about how tribalism infects us as humanity. And you're now taking a different type of archetypes that as narrative tools to make that statement. And to many people, that's when it becomes accessible, right? That's when you can say, see, this is what it's like. I know you had to understand what the Martians were doing it, why the Martians were doing it for you to really take it in. But in many ways, that distance of a genre or a creative, flavor allows you to actually make really human statements and real political statements that you can't make because it's so on the nose when you tell them the truth. And people just don't want to hear that, right? But they might hear it when, it's coming from Robin Hood or from Alibaba or Aladdin, you're Sinbad or some Titans, and you're like, oh, morality, I get it. So, that's for me, that is why you should, if your intention as an artist is to create impact, you should be searching for other mediums to utilize metaphor. Once again, that's what shaman did. They told stories about wolves and animals and light and fire And that's how you learn what it is to be a human being. So I'm a big advocate of every artist continually looking for different ways to really further their expression.
Amazing. And I'm going to use that to segue into Godfather of Harlem. Can we see it?
Yes.
Amazing. Godfather of Harlem season 2 trailer, executive produced by Paul Eckstein.
The Italians back me up for 3 solid months. But this is a game of chess. I got my pieces in position, and I'm putting their greed in check. It's time to take Harlem back. Johnson will control Harlem. He's gonna be dead by the end of the day.
You can help me get the big fish and eliminate the competition.
Open up my window again. My entire purpose is to spread the word of Islam. Without that, who am I? You and me are more alike than you think. I need you to stand up for me. Swear to God, things ain't going. Bumpy has turned into a liability.
Now is not the time for black men to turn on each other.
The Sicilians, the Corsicans, the French connection. I'm willing to fight them tooth and nail for every inch of Harlem. New world is here, my brothers.
Woo!
So hot.
Y'all ain't ready. I'm ready for season 2. Season 2 is on air now.
Yes.
So Paul, Godfather of Harlem touches all the points that we love. It's got the drama and the shooting and the sex and all of these incredible vehicles used to tell such a powerful story. Can you talk a little bit about how you use this vehicle for education? Because I think that is what I know you most for, is slipping in the education pieces of it and the history pieces of it. Paul is the historian, for those of you that don't know. He knows more history than any human I know in the world.
First off, like, this show is such a blessing. There's so many incredible people who dedicated themselves to the show. So I always make sure to really acknowledge and everybody understand how much of a collaboration what we do generally is as artists. There's so many people who come to the table, and continually blessed on the show with these incredible people that just show up all the time. But here's one of the secrets, and I take this to pass on because it is about what we do. When you are making art that is a statement, that you're trying to have an impact and uplift people, the further you go along, the more you learn to sort of get out of the way, that you have to get out of the way and let the message and the people be the things that drives you. And the more you're able to do that, at least my experience in Godfather, the more I got out of the way, the more incredible people showed up right next to me or in front of me or around me, right? So that idea of really having to look at the collision of crime and politics, of civil rights and the streets of New York City in the 60s, of really examining what was going on there and why that's impactful to us right now today. You just saw in that trailer, there's not one person that you saw on screen and not 100, 200 people behind everyone who weren't dedicated to that idea. Like, everybody gets it. Oh, okay, we're making entertainment and we're all dedicated to that as artists, and we love our craft and we're really, really exceptional at it. But we're doing this for more than that. We're doing this to examine who we are as human beings and to pay it forward. And when you have that attitude, and let me tell you, when you got Forrest Whitaker as your number one, he's your boss, Buddha is number one, everybody shows up. And that's all they're doing. That's all they're about, is impact. And then, then your job's easy. You just got to show up. And as I said, you get out of the way and let, whatever's supposed to be flowing through, flow through. And suddenly everybody's on the same page with that, even in the middle of COVID. So,
How do you decide what parts of the story to tell, right? Because there's so much that's that can shake the table, and when you're trying to be politically correct, which I know, nobody here ever is. I'm just kidding. But when you're trying to be thoughtful and be sensitive and work towards a goal, like how do you decide which pieces of the story to tell? Because it might paint somebody in a bad light, and does it matter? Because I think this also gets into a conversation of,
Jazz is trying to set me up, right? Jazz is trying to set me up because she knows what all the yelling and screaming that goes on in the writer's room, and she's seen me get loud and colored with people, so she's just trying to make a joke here. But no, seriously, I think there is certain elements to that. You hopefully set up a container where you have a group of artists that are really dedicated to telling the story, and then you chew on it. You get a lot of research. You try and be as authentic as you can. You discover that everybody's got different perspectives. Even the people who are supposedly were there and telling you the facts have different stories, and that's where you're trying to get at the essence of the truth and the aspect of narrative fiction that at least Godfather is. And I say this because what I was doing was not what these two incredible filmmakers have done. That's a different thing where I can lie, I can make some stuff up, but because I have to in the story. So then you're left with, all right, what's important here, right? And so what are the important messages that you really want to present? How do you find a theme that speaks to what your show is about and show different sides that meditate on it, different stories that meditate on it? And once again, I am blessed with some incredible people around me. Chris Brancato, Michael Paynes, Rashida Brady, Moses Vernew. Like, I had writers who brung it, okay? And they're really thinking on multiple levels of how you can be authentic and create characters and stories that are murky, that are gray, that aren't, you can really see who the good guys are. Adam Clayton Powell was a clown, but that brother was the most important political activist of our generation. People don't understand what he did in Congress, what he did every day, how he had to show up, right? That we don't know about this man, and not that we should know about Malcolm, but we don't know enough about Adam Clayton Powell and what his struggle was. And if you did, I think people would be uplifted with his struggle and then motivated to go forward, right? And so really looking for how you can ride that balance of taking a character like that and show what a clown he was, and then show how powerful he was and how dedicated he was and how much he sacrificed he was and how much we should all be proud of his legacy, even though he was kind of an idiot as well, right? Those kinds of things, showing things truthfully, like that's also what you're aiming for that can give it impact, is you're presenting human beings in narrative fiction. Like that's what we did in Narcos. Hey, look, I'm sorry. Our job was to make you fall in love with a monster. We did it every week. You wanted Pablo Escobar to win. Think about that for a second. Look, he's a hero to a lot of people, but that was one of the most horrible motherfuckers on the planet. And every week people would turn in and root for him, right? So that's because what we were trying to do is make a comment about American foreign policy and the hypocrisy and absurdity of America's war on drugs, right? And so you learn that through this character. You start thinking about, wow, man, maybe I shouldn't buy that $250,000. Maybe if I smoke that shit, I'm contributing to some evil, right? And suddenly, hopefully, you're not just entertained and seeing gunshots and crazy stories, but you actually have to think about yourself and your own actions just a little bit.
Yes. And I love that, because that, duality really brings us to understanding. The thing about cancel culture to me is that it often seems like it's the sunny side of punishment culture, which really upholds mass incarceration in so many ways. So to be able to see a whole human being and a whole story really pushes what we're ultimately trying to do, which is cancel punishment culture and eliminate, mass incarceration and a number of other things, but it takes being honest and painting the full picture, even the ugly pieces. Rameen and director Brandi, what have been your experiences in that, if any?
And wait, can I also add, because I want to know from you guys, like, how do you deal with the dichotomy of having to dig through and discover what the essence of the truth is in your mediums? That's something that's always fascinating. How do you get at that, like in relationship to your statements?
You know, the dichotomy of truth is real, right? There's so many multifaceted stories and languages and history behind what the truth really is, right? And in any situation that affects people on multiple levels in multiple ways, the same truth could be a positive for you, a negative for me, or vice versa, right? And I think at least in documentary or docu-series work, it's always digging in to find what is the truth to that character's story, that character's journey, right? So if, for example, you know, some of the folks in the Flint water crisis film and bigger, there's folks that absolutely disagreed with how the rest of the world was portraying what the governor's role was in the situation, right? Was he one that was absolutely responsible for it because he pushed the emergency managers, he pushed the sovereignty of these cities out the window? Did that take away the voice and the vote and the rights of the people? It absolutely did. Was there an effort to bring fiscal sovereignty back into some of these cities that had been failing, that had so many families, you know, struggling for decades? That was another part of it, absolutely. But you have to find, in my mind, you have to find the personal experience of the story of the character that you're telling, the story of that character. And I think it's perfectly fair and honest and almost a duty of us to show the multiple sides, to play the devil's advocate and let the viewer decide and hopefully come to the realization that nothing is black and white, nothing is straightforward. And I think that helps build, uplift, teach, and you know, make the conversation that much bigger. When we can all understand every angle of it, it puts blame where blame needs to be. It gets you back to history and where these problems and these roots started, and then connects you to what is the solution, right? Where do we go from here? And ideally in documentary and series, that's the impact of the film. That's the holy grail, per se, of what you want to get, is what comes after they watch.
I second that, Rameen. And so for Betrayal of a Nation, it was about my journey and my truth, right? And so in the film, you're following the filmmaker's journey and uncovering these truths, said truths. And so for me, it was about exploring why things are the way they are within my community and understanding how was the government connected to the demise of Black and Brown people within my community. And I wanted to understand in every facet how the government played a part and see if I could actually make those connections. And so when you talk about, okay, issues of even police brutality, right? That's local government. When you talk about, talking about local government, federal government, I needed to make the connections because I feel like at the start of my journey, I knew that, stuff was, I don't want to curse, stuff was messed up, right? But I didn't necessarily understand how the government, whether it's, like I said, local, state, federal government, how on all levels of government, how the government played a part into these things. And so for me, finding the truth was about exploring, right? Doing my research, learning my history, and then connecting the dots and then showing the dots. Okay, since this is a trial, let's talk about charges. We know that there are specific charges. If you or I committed a crime, we would be charged with. So I said, I wanted to take the book, right? I wanted to take our Constitution, our own Constitution, and look at the laws as well and say, how can I prove that the government has violated the Constitution or how the government has violated its own laws? right? By these connections that I've made, and then building that case. So I think finding the truth is definitely, like Rameen said, about the character's journey, but it's also about when you have that journey, letting that journey take you on to, I guess, take you on your own quest, right? Where you have more understanding and insight, and then you're sharing that with the viewer. And then again, like Rameen said, coming up with solutions based upon your findings. But it's all about just making those connections from your point of view, because, you know, there's a whole bunch of other people out there that that come from where you come from, and they can relate to what you can relate to. And it's just guiding them through, because ultimately, you know, often you want the viewer to see themselves in you.
That's right.
And off the note,
that character's journey.
And off the note of taking the work and moving it into a movement, I am going to do right by Rameen and play Bigger Than Water one more time with the video on this time.
Please.
If somebody had told me 3 years ago you were going to be drinking out the Flint River, I'd call them an abject liar. There is nobody in this city that wasn't told by the age of 3 or 4, you don't get in it, you don't go near it, you don't eat anything out of it. That is poison. We don't matter. Our kids don't matter. Nobody in this city mattered.
Governor Snyder, I'm glad you're taking action now, but it's a little bit late for the kids in Flint whose health has been compromised, for people whose immunity systems were already compromised, for a city in America that is on its knees because of a failure of a philosophy of governance you advocated.
People are bringing in bottles of hair. We're bringing in jugs of brown water. We're showing our rashes. We have all this physical evidence. Nobody's listening to us.
We discounted the fact that we were being poisoned. We just did not believe in America that that was happening. It's very plain. It's very simple. The love of money is the root of all evil.
You are literally in a fight for your life right now.
We will not declare a disaster zone because this is a man-made disaster.
You look at how much energy they put in lying. It would have been 1,000 times easier to do their goddamn job.
Amazing. Amazing work.
Thank you.
Incredible work. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you took the work and then turned it into a movement and what that process was like?
For Bigger, you know, we went out there on a fact-finding mission, like a way to bring aid to one of the most marginalized communities in the country, and figure out how we could do our part to help these families that were, you know, so clearly struggling and literally dying, right? And I think the biggest piece that came out of the film, to connecting it to the work that continues today, were multiple programs where we were delivering 40 gallons of fresh water every month to, you know, hundreds of families for over a year, making sure that, you know, when the city and state refused to fix the pipes, you know, replace the lead pipes that run under 90% of America, but their decision rotted the guts out of the pipes and continues to affect, to you know, get people sick. We tried to set up a platform in a way for other folks to lean in and support. We did tons and tons of different messaging campaigns and learning campaigns for folks to understand what emergency managers are, how your vote and your voice and all of those pieces of local politics. So much we're involved in, you know, what's happening with the presidency, what's happening in Congress, but all politics start at the local level, right? All politics are local. And I think what it did was it brought a level of engagement on so many levels, just conversations and programs and ways to uplift these young marginalized men who have been hunted by police for decades, giving them the platform to heal their community, a job, an income, to be the giver of light. We try to be very intentional about every aspect of what the conversation would bring, how to connect the viewer to the solutions that we could implement as a team, and as a community, as a part of that community. I feel like over the last 6 years, myself and my team and Justice League, is that team, have connected and made lifelong, roots in the city of Flint and in Detroit and in around surrounding areas, and even other places in the country where water, the source of life, has been stripped away. So everything was about intention and trying to find any nuance, any way to connect a viewer to a program that brought a solution to the people that we were talking about.
Love that. And we love tangible and equitable. We love it.
Yeah.
And so everybody on this call right now is a producer, has some producing backgrounds. How do you bring intentionality to the work that you do? What are some ways that folks that are getting into production or maybe already in the world of production, how can they be more intentional with the type of work that they're creating?
You're muted, Paul.
I'm a big fan of unmuting, first of all. I'm a big fan of research and preparation. I think in all the mediums that we play in, we know that the more that you can inform yourself before you try and use that voice, the better off you're going to be. And I'm also, here's my thing is, I'm a big fan of looking for ways, it's kind of what Brandi was talking about, looking for ways to mix mediums, right? And use that process. I think, for example, one of the things that we did in Narcos that I think really contributed to its success was we brought a doc editor into the writer's room so that all of the incredible footage about this time, this period, and this politics, we had somebody cutting it together before we were writing about it, right? Putting it together, choosing pieces, which is something you kind of usually do after and post. You're like, okay, here's the story. Let's find some, documentary footage to support this idea of, real history, Forrest Gump, whatever. That's what you've done. But what we discovered by kind of engineering it slightly different is that you're able to sort of get at the issues that the media presents in a way that is wonderfully elucidating about the truth, right? And so, I look all the time now for ways in which to just alter the systems of the way people are making things, and you might find nuanced new impact. Another one that I'd say is this, we do in Godfather. One of the bridges that we were always focusing on, that Forrest in particular was always adamant about, he's a big music guy, and he's incredible, his soundtracks on all this stuff are incredible, is how we're going to use music in the show to bridge the time, right? And so we were blessed with getting Swizz Beatz to be our musical genius. And we brought him in early, in script phase. He was on the set a lot, and he's, he understands Harlem and is a big Harlem historian himself. So he's very connected to the material. And then instead of doing a process where, we cut all the film and then we grab music and we put it in, right? We went, hey, Swizz, we want you to drop 2 songs a show, and we're going to shoot it, tell you about what we're shooting, but we're going to shoot it and cut it together. And then we're going to take that footage and bring it into your studio and have you sit there with all your homies, with all your different artists, and look at this scene and then write a song for that scene that you just watched, right? And so what that does, what we found out that doing is that the music is so popping on the show in some ways because these are artists talking about the stuff that they see in relationship to what they're experiencing, right? You listen to the opening of our show. Rick Ross is dropping some rhymes about today,
even though he's talking about Malcolm or Adam Clayton Powell or whatever else. So it was just that little adjustment in sort of the process of mixing forms. I think that I also am a big I think that's big that many people should take more advantage of when it takes a minute. You got to know what you're doing, but I can see, for example, the theater in Brandi's movies. You know what I mean? I can see this as a person who understands dramaturgy in a way that adds to the documentary format in a way that, not a lot of people have control of. So it does help, and I think that's how we're moving forward in a way and can get real impact with statements that we're trying to make.
You want to add to that, Brandi?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to add to it by just saying that as an artist, I feel like everyone has their own creative process, and I try to be respectful of that. So my creative process may not be your creative process, right? So when it comes to being intentional, for me, it's a whole hell of a process because some of it just comes from the divine. A lot of it has to do with writing every step as I go. And so when I get an idea, when I'm inspired to do a piece on something, it just starts with just that. It's just an idea, right? And then for me, it takes several days. It may take weeks as now that I've planted the seed, more ideas to just start to come. It comes to me in my dreams, but I write things down, right? Because something for me about writing is it's a form of commitment, right? When you have it on paper, it's real. When you have it in idea form, sometimes it stays an idea for a lot of artists, right? A lot of us are good at having ideas, or we're good at starting projects and not finishing them. And so when it comes to being intentional, I really feel like when you write things down, you can always go back to that piece of paper and say, this is where I left off. How can I build upon what where I last left off, right? And so I have several journals. I write wherever there's paper. And so I could be on a train and I could be like, oh, I like what that guy just said to his girlfriend. I'm gonna steal that line, right, Paul? and then I write it down, right? And
oh yeah, for sure.
Yes. And then, so it's really just, I feel like to be intentional, like I just feel like write every step of the way, even to-do lists. Okay, I need to do today, create an outline. Okay, now I have my outline. I need more inspiration. Go out and watch some dancers, go to the museum and look at some art that deal with the idea that I have. Where can I pull inspiration from? But if you write that down on your to-do list, you're gonna go out and actually do it. And now you're building upon your ideas. So
yes, man. Yes. Now this girl is preaching some real tools.
Amazing. And just one thing I'm gonna add to my own question. I'm gonna throw out a tool that I think every filmmaker, producer, studio should be adopting right now, and that's the Inclusion Writer. The Inclusion Writer is an incredible tool brought through the Change Hollywood campaign. It's all about deepening and diversifying the hiring pool, setting benchmarks, collecting and reporting data, and having accountability measures. And if you're making any films and you want to make sure that your teams are more diverse, et cetera, make sure you check out the Inclusion Writer at Change Industries. We're going to take one question from the audience, and then I think we're at time. Let's see. Where do you each find the confidence to keep pursuing your filmmaking despite the steep challenges? It's a great note to end on.
So I'll
you
say.
You go first with that one, please.
For me, I have to tell you, because being a filmmaker, especially an independent filmmaker, is not an easy road. And so I get the confidence to keep going. I'll say my mother, my family, my loved ones having that support system, my grandmother, God rest her soul, and my ancestors, honestly, the ancestors I've, I feel like I have resilience because of my ancestors. It's in my DNA, right? So every time I reach a hurdle, right, I figure out how to climb that hurdle. Every time I get knocked down, guess what? I get back up. Sometimes I may have to just completely walk away, right? But I'll tell you this, because of my resilience, I always come back. And also because of my passion, I always come back to it. You could try to walk away, but you're going to get an idea. You're going to see things happening around you, and you just can't stop the ideas from coming. And then before you know it, you're like, okay, I'm ready to work on another project, And so, and when it comes to dealing with, let's say, an existing project that you're currently working on, and you're dealing with road bumps, there's going to be a lot of times where you feel like, maybe this is it. Maybe I should just give up here. But for me, I have a slogan where I say quitting is not an option. You can always, if you have the willpower and the determination, you can always push forward. So I just got to give thanks to my mom, my grandma, and family and the ancestors. That's where I get it from.
Love that.
Yeah, I would agree. First off, first step is ancestors. Your roots, where you come from, is your reason for being. And you should be dedicated, I think, as a youth to understanding you're on a path to continually discovering that, right? And then, for me, I'm a little bit older than these cats, so I'm done. I'm kind of done with fear. I'm surprised I'm still alive anyway, let alone that I have kids and doing stuff, right? So, then I go, what's the opposite of fear, right? Because the opposite of fear, in some ways, the positive side of that is almost arrogance, almost like living in this thing where I believe the hype. If the hype can crush me, then does it uplift me? Does it make me think better of myself? Does it make me think better of the work that I've done? And if you're true, that's all nonsense, right? So in some ways, the more you get to the place where there's no fear, right? There's no fear. Like I go to this thing where, I'm meditating on a sideline a little bit, but it makes sense. The Buddhist ideology that a young man blames others, even if you're substantiated. An old man blames himself because he's looking inward, and the wise man knows there's no blame, right? There's only a path. And so when you're thinking about your work, you're going to fail over and over and over again, because you've been through that process enough times that there's no fear. There's only your actions and the crafting and shining and chiseling that happens in trying to get your idea into whatever form it is. And you're gonna fail and succeed. There's never anything that I look at that I've done where I'm like, ooh, that's great, I killed it. I'm still like, fuck, man, I wish we had that other show. You know what, God damn it, I really got there early, and she did a good job, but she didn't do it enough. I wish I talked to that actor more. Like, you're always in that place of defining and refining, because that's what your voice is about, and that's what you're really keyed into. And eventually that the fear and the success, it's all the same stuff. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is your journey, your path, answering the call of your ancestors, that sort of thing. And when you can be dedicated to that, and you're dedicated to the messages that you want to, uplift the world with, or pay it forward, or whatever noble stuff you wake up and you pray on in the morning, then you're on path. You just got to recognize that, you're not perfect most of the time. And you're going to mess up, and your stuff's going to suck, and you're going to be stupid. And yeah, so what? Guess what? I still get to take jump shots with my kids later on tonight. So I don't care if I'm an idiot.
And you should hug yourself and say, it's all a part of the process.
Yes.
Once you understand that it's all a part of the process, even the mistakes and the shortcomings, like you're on the path because it's all a part of the process. And I feel like that's something that could get you, help an artist through.
100%. It's those struggles and those scrapes that we get along the way that really build the confidence, right? It's that learning, that getting knocked down and failing and listening to, the conversations and the relationships that you build throughout making that specific project or film or short or script or whatever it is, whatever piece of intellectual property that you're trying to craft. It's like, the more you fail, the quicker you'll succeed, because each lesson learned comes with a gift, right? We stand on the shoulders of giants, of everybody who came before us, and they give us a bunch of great lessons that we can learn and live. But the best experience is the lived experience. And that's when you go through it and you accept that, I may not do it perfect the first time. I probably won't. And the more that I can swing at the bat and or swing at the ball and try to hit, at some point that ball's going out the park. So it's the confidence comes with keep stepping up to the plate, keep going, keep fighting. You're gonna make it. At some point, you're gonna make it.
I love that. And we know that the world is a better place because all of you continue to keep stepping up to the plate. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm like, I got through the event together. Thank you for being here and having this great conversation with me. I loved it. What can I say? Thanks everyone for joining us today. I believe I have some closing remarks I need to be saying rather than coming off the top of the head. Thank you again, Director Brandi Webb, Rameen, Aminzadeh, and Paul Eckstein. Please follow all these incredible artists and check out their powerful work. And don't forget to follow and support the Gathering for Justice and Justice League on social media at Gather for Justice, and on their website at gatherforjustice.org. Thank you all and have a great night.